Chapter 20 Growing Up Slow. Nowhere ever will you find the worst example of humanity than grade 9 boys. That included me. At some stage that year, a bunch of us decided that filling our mouths up with water and drinking fountain and spitting it out at our classmates was the coolest way we could spend our time. Extra points were awarded if you could squirt water over someone's shirt just before class resumed so they'd have to sit there, soaking wet, looking stupid. At first, we tried to act casual, as if our mouths weren't full of water, but it was pretty hard convincing someone you weren't going to squirt water on them when you couldn't talk. Soon, people began running after each other to deliver a mouthful. I was neither fast enough to run after people nor fast enough to escape when they came after me, so I got drenched. I sat with Robert F. one lunchtime, just before class resumed, soaked in water. "This is the issue that must be addressed," I said. "What are you going to do?" Robert F. asked. "I got an idea," I told him. I spied an empty shampoo bottle in Mom's bathroom a few days earlier. It was long and slender and small enough to fit in my pocket. I rinsed it out, brought it to school, and filled it with water. While I still didn't have the speed of the other kids, my weapon had a significantly better range. This was a major escalation. It moved the fight into the quadrangle from hand-to-hand, spit-and-run attacks to something more serious. For a few glorious days I had the upper hand. I'd hold the shampoo bottle by my side and squirt an enemy combatant as I walked by. Or I'd poke my hand around the corner of the building and wait until I could squirt someone, then quickly duck behind, away unseen. Then other kids realized they had to do the same thing. Next, some genius figured out that because the liquid we were squirting at each other was no longer carried in the mouth, it could be something other than water. There we were, filling up bottles with water and toothpaste and shampoo and squirting each other. I took part, lest I get left behind in the arms race. My preferred concoction was about 3 parts water with a little shampoo and a dollop of toothpaste. It was the perfect combination, not too thick. So it still got plenty of distance when squeezed out of the bottle, but tainted enough that if it hit, it stuck, leaving a coconut-smelling sheen topping with a minty fresh zing. The conflict attracted a lot more attention now that it was no longer just the occasional kid with water down the back of his shirt. The teacher's security council gave a few kids attention, and we were all threatened with serious repercussions if the combat continued. Chemical warfare in the schoolyard was frowned upon. The game was over. One lunchtime, I retreated to the classroom to escape the conflict and finish the math homework I hadn't done the night before. A few minutes later, one of the other kids, Ben, came in too. "Hey, Tonos," he said. "Get stuffed, Ben," I said. "Original," he said. "Original, like your nose." "You only just work out my nose is like this." "It's been obvious for a while," Ben said. "No joke," I said. "I don't know how you cope with a nose like that. It's all big and round and squishy." "Really?" I said. "Taking a look at your nose any time recently? It's pretty huge." He did, in fact, have a rather large nose. Ben scoffed something under his breath and walked out of the classroom. It wasn't the end of it as far as I was concerned. Instead of finishing my homework, I grabbed an exercise book, ripped the page out of it, and set out about drawing a portrait of Ben in profile. It wasn't the most lifelike portrait, but I absolutely nailed one part of it, his nose. It took about half the page, emerging from his face like a massive mountain. I colored in his hair, drew on ears and lips, but the nose got special attention. It was giant, pendulous, overpowering. I drew gaping nostrils, then held the artistic creation up to a smile. It was beautiful. But it was missing something. Something that gave it scale and put the size of the nose in the context. I drew several spaceships entering and leaving his cavernous nostrils, like they were docking at a spaceport. I titled it Spaceport Ben and slipped it into his desk. Proud of myself, I went to the lunch and promptly forgot about it. As with such things, though, a day of reckoning was to come, and it reckoned soon enough. Later that week, I was called to see Miss Fuller, the deputy principal. Most of the school lived in vague, unspecified fear of Mr. Fuller. He was the perfect second in command. He delivered the bad news when needed and administered a strict, non-nonsense form of discipline that mainly worked by keeping students so in fear of the threat of getting in trouble they behaved. I had no idea what I was being called down for. What Michael and Gary had told me about discipline of Ion started and stopped at the consequences of spitting, not what happened when you were called to the deputy principal's office. I sat waiting outside his office for a few minutes before being called in. He sat behind a big desk, papers neatly piled on the side. On the wall, he had shelves with books and sporting trophies. Sit down, Robert. Yes, sir. Do you know why you're here? He asked. I wonder if it was meant to be like confession at church and I supposed to say, "Forgive me, Mr. Fuller, for I have misbehaved. It, it has been about 42 days since my last admitted to my bad behavior." Then I commenced to talking in class, answering back to teachers, swearing, not doing my homework, and a range of other sins. I settled for a simple, "No, sir." "I understand you and Ben have been having some disagreements," he said. "That there's been some teasing going on." I relaxed. At least I wasn't getting in trouble, I thought. It was just teasing incident number 8024 and a long line of teasing incidents. I knew there would be more. It hadn't, but it hadn't had much impact. Well, sir, it wasn't anything really. Nothing that got me very upset, anyways. Settling scores in the deputy principal's office might seem like a good idea to some, but Dad had always taught me it was better to face things head on. You mightn't always win, but getting someone else to fight your battles for you just encouraged more fights in the future. Unfortunately, I misunderstood what Mr. Fuller was saying. "It's fine that you didn't find it very upsetting, Robert, but that doesn't mean Ben didn't," he said. It took a moment to sink in. I wasn't the TZ this time. Apparently, I was the teaser. "Oh, okay." "Not really okay, Robert. No," he said. "I'd expect that you, more than most boys, would know how hurtful teasing can be." "Yes, sir." I started to go red. "Surely you know that it can be a very mean thing to do, pick on someone because of the way they look." "Yes, sir." "Was there a particular reason for what you did? What you drew?" I thought about it for a moment. "No, sir," I said. I made a note to never, ever draw anything again, even if the spaceships going in and out of the nostrils that looked cool and very funny. "Well, Ben has been down here twice in the last 2 weeks, very upset. Don't do it again." "Yes, sir." Mr. Fuller waved me out the door and sent me away with no further punishment than my shame in having missed lunchtime. I was genuinely surprised to learn how much my drawing had upset Ben because I was teased so often myself, and I became better and better at dealing with it as I got older. Sometimes it wasn't just kids who were cruel, though. Sometimes it was adults, and somehow that was much worse. In grade 10, we had to do a week of work experience to see what life in the adult to see what life is like in the adult world. I signed up to do work experience as a teacher. It was the default for a bunch of us. I didn't know why I chose it. I was pretty sure I didn't want to be a teacher, but it seemed as good as a choice as any. Come work experience week, another boy and I were shipped off to the Catholic primary school I'd never heard of. A week before, we'd all been given a lecture about taking the opportunity seriously and behaving appropriately. When we turned to the school, we were neatly dressed and minding our manners. The two of us went to the administrative block and waited outside the principal's office for what seemed like ages. Then she came out, introduced herself, and told us that I would be working with grade 7 class and the other boys would be working with grade 2 class. At Iona, relief teachers, student teachers, and work experience kids were all fair game, but the kids at the school were just fine. The kids in the classroom were smart and engaged, and the kids in the playground were well behaved. None of them had a thing about my funny face or my legs. I got the occasional stare from a student here or there, but nothing I wasn't used to. My biggest problem the whole week was correcting the grade 7 students' spelling in class and trying to work out whether the proper spelling was potatoes or potatoes. Hint, it's potatoes. The week sailed by and was capped off with a half-day Friday for us. I said goodbye to the grade 7 class and thanked the teacher who'd look after me. Before I can go, though, I was sent to the principal's office. I thought maybe the other students and I were going to get a quick thank you, but he was nowhere to be seen. I waited outside the office for a few minutes before being called in. The school principal seemed nice enough. She was a well-spoken, middle-aged woman who seemed popular with the students. It would have been appropriate, she said, without a hello, that we were warned before you came. I had no idea what she was talking about. Warned? I asked. Yes, warned, she said. She raised her voice slightly, like I was a kid in grade 2. About you. About me? When you arrived on Monday, we had to quickly swap the class you'd be in. You were supposed to be going to work with the grade 2 teacher. I wondered for a second whether kids in grade 2 would get tested on how to spell in plural of potato. My next thought was that until we arrived, we were just names on a piece of paper anyways, so it couldn't have been that hard to change. Then it dawned to me what she meant. She was talking about the way I looked. I hadn't given any thought before I arrived of what the younger kids might make of me. I doubt my teacher and Ayana had either. I did okay there. Surely I'd do okay at another school. What was there to be worried about? I didn't know what to say. I started to cry. I'm sorry, I said. Good, she said, and got up to open the door for me. I cried all the way across the school oval to where Dad had been waiting to pick me up. I did my best to compose myself before I hopped in the car, but he knew something was going on and asked me what was wrong. I explained, and then pleaded with him not to get out of the car and go to the principal's office. Go give the principal a piece of his mind. And don't tell Mom either, okay? I can handle it. He thought about it for a minute, then decided it was up to me. Okay. It wasn't the last time I cried about the way I looked, but it was the very last time I apologized to anybody else for it.